Hi! Welcome to my channel. I'm Snappy Dragon, you can call me V, and here we do stitchy business. Real life things have been cutting into my sewing and filming time a lot lately, so for this video, I thought you could just hang out with me in the studio and draft a pattern with me. I'm working on an 1890s three-piece walking suit, and I don't like any of the main patterns I've seen for vests or waistcoats. Plus, we know that I am not a straightforward size in closely fitted upper body garments. So I'm going to draft my own pattern from the 1895 Keystone Guide to Jacket and Dress Cutting, a book well known to the historical costuming community ever since Bernadette used it to draft her Lady Sherlock outfit. This vest will be fairly similar, a single-breasted style with a V-neck and notched collar. Before we go on, a disclaimer. This is not a definitive guide on how to draft all things. This is one human drafting one pattern from one book as best as she can figure out. Some of this knowledge will absolutely translate to other types of pattern drafting, but some of it will not. I am also not an especially experienced drafter of patterns, just a beginner hoping to make this process easier for other beginners. Pattern drafting instructions, especially period ones in like this book, are usually a set of lines and points to be plotted onto paper using your own measurements for the sizes and proportions. I'm only going to show the right side draft because for an asymmetrical figure, all you would do is draft two sides with two sets of measures, but the same method. For a symmetrical figure, just draft one side. I've taken my measures according to the diagrams in the front of the book. They are very different from modern measurements. Seriously, who measures front length from the nape of the neck in the back? So be sure to check that you're measuring exactly as they describe. You'll need to measure front length, back length, blade, breast, waist, and height underarm. Prepare a piece of paper that's maybe 4 inches longer than your front length and wider than half of your bust plus 1/6 of your bust. Sounds weird, I know, but it's what the pattern uses. My customary brown butcher paper is only 18 inches wide, not big enough, so I'm using some packing paper I have lying around that's cut in 24-inch squares, and I'm taping it to the table so it stays on camera instead of me wiggling it around. My other tools of choice: regular mechanical pencil, erasable colored pencils, and all the same measuring tools I use for sewing. A tape measure, a rectangular plexi ruler, and this curve ruler. I'm sure an L square would be useful, but I don't have one. Draw lines parallel to the straight edges of your paper, one a few inches below the top, and one an inch or so in from the right side. Measure 3/4 of an inch down along the vertical line here and mark point 1, then measure your back length down from that point and mark point B. Then mark point A, your height underarm distance above B. Draw horizontal lines across the whole paper from B and A. When they say 1/12 breast, they appear to mean 1/12 of the half of your bust measure you're using to draft one side of the vest. At least that's what they mean when they describe other fractions of the bust measure. Calculate that distance, mark point B, then connect 1 to D for the center back line. The square referred to is a scaled L square, which I don't own, but I do have the internet. Either look up a picture of a scaled L square, or scale to 2/3 using math. Blade measure times 3, resulting number divided by 2. Where the center back line crosses the line from A, mark A1. A1 to K is the blade measure, then 1/4 of the scaled blade measure back towards A1 is L. Draw a vertical line through K in both directions and another from L to the top of the paper. Mark the star halfway between L and the top line, and then Y halfway between the star and the top line. The instructions don't say to do this yet, but also mark point Z halfway between the star and Y. Go back to point O and mark 1/8 of either your back length or your 2/3 scaled blade measure. Could be either, I'm guessing back length. Mark point 2 that distance along the top line from O. We already marked Z. Go ahead and connect 2 and Z with a straight line. Now, here's where things get confusing. X and 12 are not points mentioned in this set of instructions. To figure those out, I had to go back to the front of the book and read the basic waist section. While I highly advise doing that, don't try to copy it straight over because there are different points with the same names. What you need to know is, place point 9, which is 1/3 of half the bust measure, along the top line from O. Draw a straight line down from 9 until it crosses the one between 2 and Z, and mark X where they intersect. Point 12 is half of half the bust measured horizontally from A1, but they don't tell you that until much later. I should point out that I also don't know how one is meant to choose the armhole curve, so I'll just take my curve ruler and use a part of it that connects all the right dots while looking like the book diagram. This is what mock-ups are for, folks. Measure half of the bust measure, starting at A1 along the horizontal line, and mark G. Mark P at the halfway point between G and K, then draw a straight line up to the top and mark E. Again, they mean 1/6 of 1/2 of the bust, because this is 1/2 of the vest. Also, that's the only way their math works out, starting with a 36-inch bust measure. Calculate the distance and mark F on the top line to the left of E. Connect F and G, then extend that line downwards to the bottom of the paper for the center front. You may or may not use N depending on what neckline you choose. Mark it on the center front line anyways. Oh lovely, more points they didn't tell us where to place. J is directly below K on the lower horizontal line. Mark a temporary point 1 inch towards the front from J. The width of top of back is the distance from O to 2, but they don't actually tell you that until 2 pages later. Subtract that number from your front length, then measure from your temporary point up to the line from P to E. E might be above your top line, which is why we left some space on the paper there. If the new point E is different from the old, maybe erase the old one. Back to the armhole nonsense. Connect E and Y, measure the distance from 2 to X on the back, then use that same distance from E along the line you just drew to place point 13. To draw 0, 0, measure between Z and X and draw a vertical line parallel to K that same distance away. Once again, not much detail on how to draw the armscye other than it starts at 13, reaches 0, 0 in front, curves down to 12, which they still haven't actually said how to place, and then curves up to X in the back. This is how we begin the front darts. Measure G to K, divide in thirds, then mark S 1/3 of the way across and T 2/3 across. Mark U 1/2 inch to the right of S. Then do the same thing with the lower horizontal line, dividing in thirds between H and J and marking points Q and R. No extra point this time. Connect U to T and T to R with straight lines. Subtract 1/2 of the waist measurement from the bust measure you already subtracted an inch from, to find the total amount that needs to come out in the waist darts. Their math doesn't exactly line up, but whatever. Divide that amount in half for 2 darts. Mark points 4 and 5 on the waistline for the width of the frontmost dart, and points 6 and 7 for the second dart. Place V 1/3 of the distance along the line from U to Q, then draw curved lines for the dart through 4 and 5. Extend below 4 straight down to eventually mark A, and below 5 extend with a slight curve back in to eventually mark B. Do likewise with the second dart, marking point W, drawing curved lines through 6 and 7, and extending the line below 6 for C. The line below 7 curves back in 1 inch forward of straight vertical for their model. This will differ for different bodies. On me, it doesn't curve at all. Either way, this will eventually be D. Now they finally tell us about point 12. Place it if you somehow did the armscye without doing it already. The point 9 they're talking about now is a different one from the armscye, and the instructions for it are super confusing. Take the half of your waist measure for this side of the vest, and either add 1 inch and then divide in half, or divide in half and then add 1 inch. I think it's the second because the first one would lead to overlapping in an area where the pattern should be getting smaller, not bigger. Keystone, you need a lesson in order of operations. Whatever option you chose for 9, use the same method for 8. Divide 1/2 of your waist in fourths, then subtract 1 inch. My body is nearly cylindrical in this area and doesn't change circumference much, so 8 and 9 are very close together. Starting at E, measure the distance of your front length to reach the center front line, and mark M there. Draw a straight line across to T, which appears to be directly below point 8. Yes, this is a new point E. Mark it halfway between T and 8, and then connect it to M. Now we're on to drafting the bottom edge. Remember those points below the waist level on the front darts? From E to D, the bottom edge follows the line we just drew. C is a tiny bit up from that line. B is right on the line, and A is directly across from B as if on a horizontal line. Then connect A to M for the center front point. I don't know if I count as a small size by this book standards, but I'll go with a small size option anyways. Measure 1 inch from X towards 2 and mark point 3, and then measure 1 inch from 13 towards E and mark point 14. And then redraw the armscye. N is for a high neckline. I want a V-neck with a notched collar, so I'm measuring a 10-inch line from E to reach the center front. They assume that the desired neckline depth is measured starting at the nape of the neck over the shoulder to the front, just like their front length measure, so you would need to subtract the back neckline width. But I think that's silly, and I'm starting from the shoulder seam. Add 1/2 inch to the left of G along that line, presumably for ease or overlap, and then smooth out the curve of the center front. Draw a straight horizontal line at the height of E on the bottom edge, and mark F and G for the corners of the back piece. They skip the bit about extending the center back below D. It appears they draw a straight vertical line down for the center back instead of continuing the angle. Wait a second, Keystone. Wait just a hecking second. You're telling me you measured over this person's clothes? Oh no. We still want these little back darts though. They just don't tell us how to place them. I'm gonna guess roughly equidistant between the center back and the side seam. Another now they tell us what that means moment. Flip to the next diagram, measure the distance from O to 2, and place point 1 directly that distance above E. We marked this as point 20 earlier, but sure, whatever you say. Connect point 20 and E with a straight line. Replace that line with a slight curve, and connect it to the curved center front line. I'm not drafting the collar now, that is a problem for another day. We're going to turn the 2 darts at the front into 1 dart right between the 2. Go back to the total amount that needed to come out in darts. Widen the side seam by 1/3 of this amount, redrawing is needed. If you want to flip back and see how clearly they explain it, it's on page 26 with the Eton jacket. It's pretty much the same as doing the darts earlier. Instead of drawing down from P, connect V and W and mark T halfway in between. Mark a point halfway between H and J, draw a line down from T, and measure 1/3 of the total amount to be removed in darts on either side of that line. Draw curved lines to connect the darts, and then redraw the bottom edge. We now have a completed draft. To create a proper usable pattern out of this, I'll do the left side, trace off the outside edges and darts onto tracing paper, add seam allowance, and then create a mock-up for more precise fitting. However, those are projects for another day. I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough, and if you're thinking of using the Keystone Guide for anything, you feel more prepared. Real-life events are making my upload schedule a bit unpredictable, so if you want to see this 1890s walking suit coming together, please like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss anything. Also, pop down in the comments and tell me about something you'd love to make but can't find a pre-made pattern for. If you want to support the channel, you can head over to my Ko-fi page to contribute to the Small Dragon Tea Fund. I'll see you next time. Happy sewing!